Closing out the conference, we have our Women in Industry panel, a unique opportunity to hear from all women across this space, ranging from venture capital to software engineering to research to design. Please join me in welcoming panelists Aya Miyaguchi, Executive Director at the Ethereum Foundation, Dovi Wan, Managing Director at Danhua Capital, Awa Soon Yin, Research Director at the Interchain Foundation, Christine Chiang, Head of Communications at Cosmos Academy and Tendermint, and Megan Maloney, Investor at General Catalyst. Please also join me in welcoming Sheila Warren, Head of Blockchain and Distributed Ledger Technologies at the World Economic Forum, and recently named Lattice 80 Top 100 People in Blockchain. She will be moderating this industry panel.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Am I on now? There we go. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've talked a lot today, it's been a really long and fascinating day, about the protocol layer, the technical layer, and so we're going to go back up a level now and really talk to some of the leading minds in industry about this technology, what it can do, what it's doing, what it could do, what it's not doing, and I'll dispense with some of the formalities in favor of really getting as much time as possible with these women. So what I've asked them to do is just quickly do an intro where they're going to say their name, who they're working for or with, what got them hooked on this space, what was the catalyst that really sparked their interest in distributed ledger technology, and something they're working on right now that they're really excited about. So again, name, company, what got you into the space, and something you're working on right now that you're really excited about.
Starting from me? Okay. Remind me if I skip anything. Hello, everyone. My name is Aya Miyaguchi. I am the Executive Director of the Ethereum Foundation. And then, what was next? Yes. I've been actually in the industry for a while. I first got interested in Bitcoin when there was no Ethereum back in 2011. And then I thought that this blockchain technology would be amazing too. So my interest was really using this technology for social impact, and specifically for financial inclusion, and especially making women more financially independent. That was my original interest, and then I got an opportunity to work on an exchange, and I just joined the foundation recently. But I was always a supporter of Ethereum and the Ethereum Foundation for its vision. So what I'm working on right now is kind of coordinating or making this decentralized structure of the community. Ethereum has really amazing community. And then it's all about the community, and then let the community members, including developers and researchers or other organizations, to support this ecosystem that also technology itself is also all collaborated. It's open source. So I'm coordinating all the education effort, research and development, and also do more community activities. That's what I'm working on.
Great, thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Lee, and I work at Zcash as a user experience researcher, trying to make it easier to use for people. And what got me interested in blockchain technology was initially the cool crypto. I have a master's degree in computer science from Berkeley, so this place is very special to me. Something that I am interested in doing is to make Zcash efficient, fast, and easy to use, and that means just testing out as much of the wallets and exchanges out there as I possibly can and learning along the way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Maloney. I am an investor at General Catalyst, which is a venture capital firm. We actually invest across all technology, the entire technology sector, but I have been specifically focusing on crypto and a couple of other themes. What got me interested in this space is it's sort of a perfect synergy of two areas that I love, which are economic theory and game theory, and as well as technology. And so I had heard about it, and I had some friends who used to dabble in the space back in college, but it's actually when I started coming into venture capital world and meeting with a lot of interesting teams where I started getting very, very deep in the space. What I've been working on now is actually just hearing pitches every day. There's a lot of activity in the space, and so I sit at the center of what I view as a lot of individuals working on similar problems and trying to figure out how can I actually bring these communities together. So I've started putting together events at our office as well as on conference builder sessions. How do you bring builders together? Investors are actually pretty collaborative in the space as well. So there are a lot of VCs and angels who talk about what are some interesting projects we've seen, how can we be more collaborative in making sure that these teams really get built and get the funding they need. So that's how I'm in the space.
Hi, I'm Christine. I go by the moniker Chango on Chain, and I work for Cosmos as the communications lead, and I'm currently working on the Cosmos Academy educational resource that teaches you how to use Cosmos technology stack. And I'm really excited about creating the Cosmos launch video, which is going to come soon when we launch for mainnet. And I first walked into the rabbit hole of what is money, what is Federal Reserve, where does money come from, and then it surfaced from that conspiracy, and then found Bitcoin as the solution, and that was the aha moment. And I was a Bitcoin maximalist, and now I'm a Cosmos maximalist.
Hey everyone, my name is Awa Sun Yin. I'm from Barcelona, and yeah, right now I just joined the ICF, which is same as the Ethereum Foundation, but for Cosmos. My role is as a research director. What got me interested in blockchain? So, 2014, I did an exchange to Montreal. Back then, I wasn't 21 first. I needed an ID to go to drink in the US whenever. So by that time, I looked into different alternatives, and I decided to just buy some Bitcoin to buy a fake ID. And that was my very first interaction with blockchain technology. But of course, back then, 2014, I didn't really know that much about blockchain. Officially, I've been working in the space for 2 years, ever since I started researching about anonymity and privacy. Yeah, so my role at the ICF is currently I'm working specifically I'm collecting data and then try to provide this objective picture of where we are now as an ecosystem. So I'm finding out what is the research going on, what are the problems and limitations that we are currently facing, be it Bitcoin, be it Ethereum, be it Cosmos, and then what kind of research we need to perform or are currently done to solve those problems in an objective and way. So once that is done, I'll probably open source that, and then after that is going to be about finding researchers, developers who are keen on working on this to solve these kind of problems.
Thank you, everyone. So I think in line with the Gartner hype cycle of technology adoption, there tends to be this phase you go through when you really get into this space where you become a massive evangelist for it. You're up at night thinking about use cases, and you're so excited for every single thing this technology could possibly do. And then you get to this, what I call blockchain pragmatism, where you kind of say, okay, here's what it is, here's what it does, here's what it's good for, here's what it's best for, etc. But I think there are still an awful lot of people in the sort of layperson community, let's call it, who are very hyped about this technology, and we're certainly seeing a lot of media attention that remains on it, particularly on Bitcoin and Ethereum. So my question for the panel, and for any of you, really is, why do you think we're not seeing that transformative effect, the widespread adoption of this technology that was promised, whether in the white paper in terms of the currency space or just a general matter? What do you think is a barrier to adoption of this technology? Is it the tech's not quite ready, some people say? Is it the psychology of society is not quite ready for decentralization? What do you think are the reasons there? Anybody?
The infrastructure is not ready yet. And everyone's scrambling to build everything at the protocol layer, but then really to get anything to the end user, we really need to lay down the foundations right and securely. So we're not there yet.
Do these work?
Oh, okay. We each get our own.
I agree that the infrastructure is not quite ready yet, but although I am a huge privacy advocate, I feel like sometimes the space is very polarizing and it says, you know, down with the government, down with banks, and there's some people who work for banks and some people who like banks, and I feel like I want to get digital currency to a place where it is just the most convenient thing to use, it is the easiest thing to use, it has lower fees, and you're going to use it just because it's there, not necessarily because we're attacking your personal identity. And I also think that the shift from centralization to decentralization, the psychology of it, combined with the volatility of the price with cryptocurrency and the regulation that makes them a security, is just kind of making everything go a little bit slowly.
Yeah, I would just add one thing. So if we remember what the first use case of Bitcoin was, if you read the paper, it was a peer-to-peer payment system, right? And I think what happens, and a lot of times when we're building technology, is that our utopia or our use case sort of runs ahead of what it actually takes to build out the infrastructure. So to this panel's point, Bitcoin's actually turned into probably a store of value because the infrastructure wasn't ready for it. So scalability, custody, there are so many building blocks that need to come about, and I think really, really good teams are working on these problems right now. I think you'll see a lot of things coming out to the mainnet in sort of Q3, Q4 this year, and even into next year. But we just have to be patient. It doesn't happen overnight. It's been, 10 years since the paper came out, and we're still talking about the base level stuff here. So it's going to take a little bit of time.
I think it's a combination of everything they said, but one is definitely the infrastructure problem. That's the reason why I decided to support Ethereum, because all the product that I was supporting on the social impact side wouldn't be able to actually work without the infrastructure issues solved. But also at the same time, when there's innovation, there's always this huge pressure. I've been going through this forever since I joined this industry, talking to regulators and explain this to media, and combination of fear that comes from the conventional word, but also at the same time lack of education, which we need to do better. So I think I just have to keep doing it. The same thing, but I think we are making little progress. And getting there, including the infrastructure solution also, it's getting there too.
And I do think it's funny that we often compare blockchain or distributed ledger to the internet. That's like one of the most common analogies you see is what year of the internet are we in, et cetera. And the difference, I think a key difference, is that with the internet, you didn't have the internet already. So there's a little more time to get into the infrastructure, and it was a bit more ready for things like email, et cetera, by the time the application layer really began being built. Whereas here, we're really kind of operating in parallel, and there's all of this build going on in the application layer, if you want to call it that, at the same time as we're still working out the kinks at the protocol level. So with that kind of pivots to my next question, which is, there is what's the polite word? There is a plethora of white papers every day. You could spend your entire day and never sleep and just read white papers all day long. And I'm curious, as people who do this in various capacities in your day jobs, is there a phrase or an idea or a concept that when you see it in a white paper, you kind of do your eye rolling, oh God, I got to now recommit to reading this thing, because it's just a phrase that to you signals oh, this is not where I was hoping this was going. Is there something like that you can identify that seems to be thematic? It doesn't have to be white paper. It could actually be any sort of media or anything that's kind of discussed about a new idea in this space. I'm looking at the funder first.
Go first. So it's just the question around what is it that maybe...
Just a signal that you're oh, no.
Oh, okay. Some people have actually pasted their picture multiple times and said that I'm the full team. I mean, there are interesting things that come through in white papers, so you actually have to read the whole thing. That's the first thing. So actually, just on the concept of white papers, that has been a fundamental change in how we view companies, right? So the ICO funding mechanism, in some ways, has the potential to disintermediate at least part of the venture capital industry. And it provides access to founders, direct access to capital for founders. And so when we are inundated, I wouldn't say inundated, but receiving a lot of white papers, the question becomes, what's your core thesis? This is how we're viewing it at General Catalyst. What's our core thesis as a firm, and where do we want to spend our time, right? Because we can be spending hours and weekends and days reading white papers. So what we usually do start with is team, to be quite frank. It is still the case that what's different about it is these are going to be consensus, algorithmic-driven mechanisms, but usually there is, a lot of teams are approaching like the Vitalik approach where someone's driving it and building out the community. So the second piece is actually the community itself. You can, before even looking at the white paper, a lot of teams actually send, this is how many Telegram users we have, this is how many people are on our Slack channel. And the reason that's important is because, at least at the protocol layer, you are going to have a lot of developers working on either building on your platform or actually working on just the underlying protocol because it's open source, right? So even if you have a really great idea and no one's building on it, that becomes less interesting. And the third thing is actually some teams do accompany their white papers with decks. So you can sort of, I was actually thinking about Tezos the other day because if you remember, Tezos had a really long technical white paper, and then there was a positioning paper as well. And there's been a couple of teams who have taken that approach. So it really depends on where you are in the process, but a team will usually have like a shortened version and then a longer white paper.
I like the tweet storm myself. I can just quickly get what I need and move on. Yes, please.
Does this work? Yes, it does. Just a little bit like on the edge, but is there anyone here who's doing data science, machine learning? Could you raise your hands? Okay, no, I thought there would be more. But very interesting opportunity or thing that I'm personally trying to approach at the ICF level is build a classifier that basically filters papers. So collect all the papers and then get the raw data, so all the content, and then basically try to classify is this, worth reading instead of, is this a marketing material, is this research? So try to go for automated ways of processing data as opposed to having to go through all this data manually because it's just a lot of time. It's just the opportunity cost is really high, and a lot of times, like if you start reading it, you won't really understand it unless you spend some time on it because of the language, because of the topic, and all those kind of things. So data science people or whoever is into machine learning, I would definitely go for this kind of automated processes.
I don't even start reading white papers until I see that there's code in the GitHub, and then I could better evaluate whether or not they're actually serious about building something out, whether they have competency to build something out, because it's one thing to write something at a really high level and be able to sell something really well. It's another thing to just like demonstrate it by doing through code. And so, if their code is open source, then you could very easily evaluate which ones like know what they're doing versus which ones don't. And they're just like selling you.
And I do think it's dizzying when you start, as I think someone mentioned on the first panel today, and then throughout the day, there's just so much information. But when you get into it, you will realize that it really isn't. It's not that hard to differentiate at sort of a binary level, like what is worth more engagement and investment of your time and what maybe isn't. If you want to get granular, like if you're funding, for example, that's obviously a much different interrogation of a particular protocol or white paper or token or whatever it is. But most of us are not in that space. And so I actually think that I found it very intimidating at first when I just the sheer volume of things you could do in this space in terms of reading, but it's not that hard to differentiate. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment.
You can screen most of them like with very basic question, like some of the stuff that they mentioned, but also like starting with, if it's for an ICO, like starting with, does this even need token? A lot of products out there do not sound like they actually need blockchain or tokens. So, but.
So we actually issued today from the World Economic Forum a toolkit designed to really help focus on use cases that actually need Ledger, as opposed to ones that could use Ledger and that's fine, or ones that really should just put the Ledger down, like walk away. You really just don't need it. And the goal there is to get people who are business leaders to really, who are not technical, who are not ever going to be able to engage in conversations like the ones that we're having today, or really have the time or the desire to do so, but to enable them to understand, like, what is the point of this? What is it for? And really kind of what is it not for as well. And the goal is to kind of burst some of this bubble and stop some of this like hyped activity that I think is leading to things like my next question, which is about regulation. So one of the reasons you're seeing a lot of regulation, it's not just the volatility of the currency, at least that's what the regulators that I talk to all the time claim. It's also just that there's such a boom in things like white papers or activity or ICOs, like all these other things that are going on in the space, and they consider that alarming, which I think is a very reasonable, frankly, reaction if one is a regulator. So, but I'm curious, just from, because again, we have a diversity of views on the panel in terms of background and industry. Regulation, pro or con? Like, do you think that this is having a good effect, like in the terms of the chilling effect on the space? Do you think that this is too much too soon? And I'm talking specifically even about today when we heard a senior regulator basically said that Ethereum and XRP are securities and they just behave like securities, and who are we kidding? Which was a pretty significant thing to have be said by such a senior person. So any thoughts on regulation?
Oh my gosh, I had to spend for like half day for that meeting. And like you saw my name on that. I actually have a good example because I've been talking to especially Japanese regulators, and Japan is, as you know, like probably known as a crypto-friendly country, which I think I'm partially responsible for that, or maybe more than partially. But originally, Japan decided not to regulate the space when I first reached out to the government and the people there. And then the market was still like, there was no crypto industry in Japan. Like right after Mt. Gox collapsed there, the Mt. Gox just happened to be in Japan, but no one was using Bitcoin within Japan. So that was a smart decision. And then after a while, the industry became a little bit bigger. And for especially a business like an exchange, for them to be able to work with other financial institutions, they were the other financial institutions were not really comfortable working with any crypto companies without the space being regulated. So that kind of opened up. The new regulations actually started from last year, helped to bring the industry to the next level. That's one thing. But at the same time, I think it all depends on how they make decisions for everything. Like when they drafted this, like original draft, that was like a long time ago, and then it takes a while to become the regulations to be effective. In the meantime, the industry moves really quick, and now they have to care about, there's ICO, there's hacking, and then what are we going to do with this? So they have to be very smart, but I hope they will be, to make smart decisions. Like I always advise that they shouldn't really make any decision too quick, because most of the time when this ICO hype, and then there's like you can get freaked out just by watching that now, because this is a very temporary stage. And so I think it's the important things for them to actually be calm and watch it for a while. It's really not easy for them because they hear all different stories. It's mainly bad stories, always bad stories. And that's important for them. And then for us, it's important for us to tell them that actually there are good stories and good products out there happening. And then you should actually know that in order to support them in the future, to actually make the innovation happen, and also create this social impact happen. They can't really limit the potential too much by putting too strict regulations.
I would like to provide a perspective on the situation in Europe. I don't know that much about how, in the US, I don't know much about, except for compliance and KYC rules. But in Europe, currently, last month, the European Commission released on the press something about what the last discussion was about cryptocurrencies regulations, and the take was that currently cryptocurrencies are believed to be anonymous, pseudonymous more likely. Due to the lack of transparency, it's hard to regulate them. At the same time, how do we prevent cryptocurrencies from being used for illicit activities, all these kind of things, which is really relevant and which is mandatory for any member state of the European Union to deal with. But at the same time, the speech was about how Europe can regulate this without having to stop the growth of this space, so enabling the adoption in a way that we can at the same time make sure that it's not used for not the right purposes, but at the same time foster this kind of growth. And I think, I don't know how it is like in the US, but I think there are governments who are open to the idea of, let's just try to regulate in a favorable way. But let's think about who makes decisions, who are the regulators, what is their background, do they understand the technology? In a lot of cases, they will probably go with the best of the knowledge. And I do remember there was another press release before this one, which they said that the only way we can make sure that that cryptocurrency is not used for the wrong purposes is to basically collect all the data of all the users in a centralized way. And I think regulators especially, they will need people who are working with the tech, who are working in this ecosystem, to basically teach them that there are ways to do this without having to give away the privacy of the users. And I think it's not only about this, it's also only about they need to understand how this actually works, what are the actual implications, how do they affect, who are the users, where are they facing, what are they using. So yeah, I think it needs a lot of help from people who are building this ecosystem. And then if anyone here has any kind of connections to regulators or these kind of things, and you know about the tech, and I think you should definitely try to put your, help in there. That would be really good.
So, I can talk about what's happening from a regulatory perspective, at least what I've been seeing. In no way am I a securities lawyer. This is not advice, all of that good stuff. So when the SEC came out with the 80 subpoenas, it was 80 or so teams that got subpoenaed back in February. What I saw on the venture side was a lot of people started declining meetings. So here's the potential issue with regulation in the environment we're in right now is that we don't really have clarity. What we have are a lot of questions. And so what I do know is that the SEC, DOJ, FINRA, there's all of these regulatory bodies that are basically trying to figure out what cryptocurrencies are, right? Is it a commodity? Is it a security? Is it a utility token? I think it's not a utility token because, as we were just talking about, people can't really use it for anything right now, right? So maybe next year, some of these projects actually will be utility tokens, but as they stand, they are releasing tokens on exchanges, people are trading them, and they're not necessarily being used for anything exactly today. So how do you regulate that when there might be a potential use case in the future, but at least today it's essentially trading between two parties? I talk to a lot of teams who are more at the, I call it the picks and shovels layer. So think custody solutions, exchanges, et cetera. The way that they're approaching it is actually having very, very targeted discussions with the SEC to just get them up to speed on what they're building, and then these regulatory bodies will probably come out with some guidance in the future. But that has put some strain on the funding side, just because if you are going out to raise money, even at the protocol layer, you have to decide what type of investors you want in your ICO or whatever mechanism that you're using to fundraise, right? So if you're not going after accredited investors, are you willing to sacrifice that and potentially be targeted by regulators in the future? What I will say about the subpoena is that those are requests for information, right? It doesn't mean that the SEC has actually prosecuted anyone or gone after these teams from an arrest point of view, but anyone that's really been on, there's a gray area right now, and then there's some areas that you know that these projects were scams. I wouldn't be surprised if some projects got hit pretty hard. I know there have been a couple of actually that regulatory regulatory bodies have gone after. So it's something that we're like in a wait and see, looking for clarity.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I am okay with regulation. I mean, I'm not in love with it, and even being okay with it isn't a popular opinion, but I just feel like at my brother's co-working space before, they used to have free beer on Fridays until one guy got super smashed every Friday, and now they don't have free beer. And I feel like we used to have a very cool, exciting way to fund things very easily, and then now some people are not building anything with it and stealing people's money, so we don't deserve it anymore, I guess. And
we can't have nice things, right?
I know, and personally, I'm happy to abide by all these tax rules when I have crypto, and personally, Zcash, we're happy to play by the rules because our innovation is in our technology, not in our funding structure, so we're just going to keep doing good work.
The way that I see that regulators could work with the technology today is through the blockchain technology that we're building at Cosmos. Because we have something called the Cosmos SDK, which is a blockchain framework that you could write in Go. And we have plug-and-play modules, and one of those things is just a compliance module. You could build like a KYC AML module. So if regulators want to regulate, they can with blockchain technology.
And you can also do it privately without having to give away personal information.
One thing I do think is really interesting is this interplay, and again, I think this is where we really diverge from the internet and where that analogy falls apart, is that, there is this interaction between the funding structure the funding structures rather that are being used for development, the development layer. And we're still, by the way, as we noted, developing in this sort of protocol-based foundation layer. It's not just applications being funded. So the ICO model is not just a substitute for traditional VC. It's actually really thinking about the deep, deep foundations of the infrastructure being built for everyone else to build in going forward. So we're in this weird place where the regulation is interacting with presumably with the funding protocol, but it has implications for what could actually be built based on what kind of funding structure various individuals, for whatever reason, are able to access, right? And I think that this is a really important thing that doesn't get enough airtime, frankly. Because I think that when you look at the sheer diversity of engagement by regulators around the world, which we talked about a little bit here, Japan versus China is an obvious example, even Korea, looking at the European Union and the US, which is relatively crypto unfriendly, frankly, compared to many other jurisdictions. And you think about where people are building, like where they're having to set up companies and what that actually means and what kinds of people are able to do that. Like what kinds of people are actually able to set up a Swiss foundation, which was a very popular model last year, not so much now. Like who is able to actually access that kind of structure, right? So how much are we actually holding to the integrity of the promise of this technology around decentralization when the way that we're thinking about the ecosystem in which it's being built is to some extent a little bit limiting and kind of puts the onus or the ability on certain kinds of individuals, oftentimes those who are wealthy and have access. So again, I appreciate the responses. I think it's really interesting. And I think that I personally, again, I'm not I don't not favor regulation. I mean, I'm a lawyer by training, so, there you go. But I also think, say what you will, but I also think that to the extent that regulation is about porting in principles that we agree on, like ethical principles, like fraud prevention or, security or these kinds of things, right? Things that we just think are a good as a general matter that we could kind of get consensus, around being good things. To the extent that we're kind of taking some of those ideas and trying to bake them into the regulation, I think that's actually a good thing. I think it gives us this structure in which we can actually feel confident that there'd be something to be said, and you could argue this one way or the other, that if every white paper that was issued had as a baseline protocol layer, like a baseline built into it, just some sort of structure that did ensure true decentralization and or equity and inclusion, right? If you could do that, if that had to come from external source, I'm not sure that would be a bad thing. It's something we're all trying to achieve in various ways. So I'll pause there before I go off on my other rant that I often do and ask another question, which I think is really relevant to this audience, which is there are so many points of access into this world. And we heard this morning from a bunch of really amazing students who are really involved in this space and who all were very transparent about how they started off really with very little knowledge and were able to build very, very quickly. So what is advice that you all as professionals would give to someone who maybe a student who's just starting out, who isn't necessarily sure what they want to do when they grow up, in terms of like what kind of job they might even want, but who's just very interested in this space? What would be some just fundamental things you would advise them to do?
Follow your bliss. If this is really your curiosity, then it's in no way an uphill battle to learn about everything there is to learn in this space. Then it's just your passion, and then if you work towards it, I started working for free at first just to get experience, and then applied my strengths and skills wherever I could, and then share it publicly. And then as long as you get feedback that you are disseminating value, you will find a place in the space.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. Blockchain or cryptography, it's not math, it's just magic. And the companies aren't made of magic. We still have people who manage projects and market, and there's HR, there's software engineers that work on products with user interfaces. There's cryptographers who do really mathy things. And if you want to contribute to the protocol layer, take a lot of math. I would advise a very strong math background. I would say that a traditional computer science background doesn't give you quite enough math unless you specify very early on or double major. So that is one piece of advice if you really want to be influencing the protocols at the base layer. But I think just honing in on a skill that you like and knowing that you can just work at a blockchain company even if you're not directly working on protocols. I think just go for it, don't be intimidated, and keep on trying, and yeah, be useful.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Since these are mostly for young women, or not, I think it's just if anyone is ever interested in this space, thinking that this is the space you can make most money, because it sounds like, I think it's wrong, and especially when you're young, I just followed my passion, and when I joined in the industry, there was no woman. There was literally no woman. But I think it's, and I did Bitcoin value. The value was nothing, and there wasn't even Ethereum. But it just happened to be, this space has become like a little bit crazy, like money place now, which I'm a little sad about. But I think that intention is important. You should know what you're passionate about, and then you should follow that passion, and the money should follow. And then, especially when you're young, you should really respect your creativity and the freedom that you have, and then go for it. And then that's how I got here.
So I already talked about this with high schoolers before. So I have two things I would like to tell people who are especially thinking of getting into this space. The first thing is to make sure you do your research. So make sure that you do not develop in a very early stage this kind of tunnel vision towards a specific implementation, a specific technology. Make sure to understand what the ecosystem is as a whole, so you get the bigger picture first, and then you make a decision on where is it that you think you'll fit the best. But while you figure this out, you're going to realize that there are some holes, there are some problems that are currently not being solved yet, where if you solve it, is basically you become a very necessary person in the ecosystem. Which leads me to the second thing that I told before the young girls over there, is that in career, first of all, most of the times it's likely for it to take like a bunch of tries until you find the thing you actually like and you feel good about working on. Because at the end, we spend like at least 8 hours every day on the job, so it'd be pretty sad if you just spend that on something you don't enjoy. But again, you only will find out until you try it. But when you decide for something, and then you have to understand how jobs, like how do job interviews work? How does the job hunt thing work? And in a lot of cases, it's just about a situation where there's two parties, and one of the parties has more bargaining power than the other one. And then sometimes it's just you can't really fight against this bargaining power. In the case, for example, large corporations, they know exactly what they're looking for, and they know that if you don't take this, they would take somebody else, and it's actually fine, because they'll probably just have a whole program and everything. But like a way of fighting this kind of power imbalance is, for example, making yourself very unique. So if you have I think there's like two ways of going down this in, and I'm speaking now for blockchain, it is either you find out something, you develop a very technical skill that nobody else or like very few people in Earth are actually able to do. In the case of smart contracts, which have been around for maybe 3 years, people who have been developing like for a year only, they're basically considered the experts in it because maybe there's a fistful of other people who have that much experience with it. So find those niches where you, as technically, can actually contribute that much to it, and then you can actually shift this power, and now you will be in this side instead. And another way would be that you decide that you don't want to be that person who is so deep into one specific topic. Then maybe you come from a non-technical background, and maybe you come from something totally related to computer science, but it will be good for you to try to find those intersections, because sometimes in intersections is where there's more value. Now I foresee that there's a lot of people in computer science trying to attract people from economics because of this term cryptoeconomics, and sometimes that doesn't work out because economists are not, they have their own way of thinking, and they're not always keen on learning about the tech. So if you come from that side, something that's not directly related to computer science, try to learn the tech. You don't need to go really deep. You just need to learn enough so you can actually leverage this part of the tech for your the other side. Yeah, that was a bit long. Sorry.
I think we have time for one final comment. We're unfortunately at time. Go ahead.
Really quickly. So I think the panel hit it all really well. Something I get very jealous of from a college student perspective is that you are sitting in a sea of really smart people who share mutual interests with you. So talk to people. Literally just go to meetups. Maybe you organize your own meetup and get people to start talking about what's happening in the crypto space. You'll find that online forums, Twitter, whatever it is, are pretty scattered. The reason is it's because as smart as we all are, no one actually knows what's going to be built 20 years from now. Right? We know we're building something really, really special, at least I believe that. And I really think that it's actually important to start attracting other people with different perspectives to the space. It can be intimidating, but I promise you, if you just start talking about it and throwing out ideas, you might even want to start building something as opposed to joining a team. Like, I would actually really, really strongly consider going online and start practicing in Solidity and just like build a smart contract, see what happens. Do you like it? Do you not? Maybe you want to be more in game theory and just think about what happens when you issue a token. How will other players start to react to that? I mean, I've seen teams with economists, I've seen teams with PhDs, I've seen teams with college students. So it is such a green field. I wouldn't be intimidated by what you might see online. Just start talking to one another and use your community on campus.
Great. Thank you so much to everyone. We'll be around for a little bit after too. Thank you.
All right, so we wanted to really give a huge thanks to every single one of you who came out to the inaugural SHE256 conference and really helped jumpstart this movement. We all hope you were able to come away with some inspiration and insight and hopefully some invaluable connections as well.
We'd love to give a huge thank you to all of the women who came here and took their time to share their knowledge and their work with the space and with our wonderful audience. And we'd love to give a huge shout out to all of our sponsors without whom this event would not have been possible.
Lastly, we'd love to thank our team, without which we would have never even thought to pull this off. All of this came together in less than 2 months, and none of that could have been possible without all the countless hours and passion shown by the following individuals. We want to shout out Cliff On and Annie Chen, our logistics leads, Ria Savla, who made this entire scholarship program possible, Natalia Yurakshina, our marketing lead, Catherine Chang, our lead designer, Maggie Valentine, Elaine Kim, and Natalie Yu, the rest of our stellar design team, Vivian Wu for being a part of our scholarship committee, Avinash Parwane, and Avneet Saini for being our sponsorship committee. Thank you and all the volunteers from Blockchain at Berkeley who made this happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
To the SHE256 team that is right there. We would love to give all of you a wonderful shout out. We would not have had this event. It wouldn't have been possible without any of you. Thank you so, so much. Thank you.
SHE256, this Women in Blockchain conference, is just the beginning of a long-lasting mentality and movement. So we're so excited that you could join us today for the first, inaugural event. And keep your eye out for future events happening. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, also Instagram. We'll be hosting some more events in the future.
Yeah, blockchain is a disruptive industry. So let's disrupt the industry with more diversity. Thank you.